this guy's so good on paper, and, we have such an awesome time. Like, maybe our makeout sessions are great. And then, you want to take it to the next level and it just flops.
You are listening to Relationship Renegade Weekend Edition, and I'm Jameson Mercier, and
I'm Nancy.
Thank you guys for joining us again for another episode. So today, not even today, we've just been having this conversation. It's more or less a theme that pops up within the context of relationships, of course, but generally speaking, outside of relationships. This is something that try to avoid it. You can't. It follows you. And the topic is expectations.
Ooh, great expectations.
Great expectations. And that's why we've titled this episode, Great Expectations, because we all have them. It's almost like no matter what the context is, what the situation is, the default mode is high expectations.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And we were talking about too, are they bad? Is it bad to have a high expectations?
Personally, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
But then, years ago, I kind of changed the world that I live in.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't live in the world of good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I just kind of live in the world that is.
Mm-hmm. You're present.
Yes. And the decisions I make are not good or bad decisions. They are decisions.
Talking more about that later on.
Yeah.
That's a good topic. I like that.
Yeah. That just, it's much easier for me to live in that world than in this world of good and bad and right and wrong.
Right.
So, but great expectations, this is something that we all have,
Mm-hmm.
You were telling me a funny story a moment ago about your birthday plans.
I was, yeah. I have, expectations are a very funny little thing. I was telling him, like, we have expectations a lot in our daily lives, and they're from something small to something big to even projecting our expectations to other people or even our community. So yeah, I was telling him that, I planned my birthday party. I was going to do this. Had these decorations. I invited these people. I knew I was going to have a good time, building this up in my head. Like that's the expectation. Holy moly, that's a really big expectation. And then you know what? It rained. And I was like, mother effer, like, gosh, that's so annoying. I had this planned. I spent so much time doing this. And then you kind of can get like annoyed and bitter and like resentful. Like the world is against me.
It's ruined.
It's ruined. To hell with this, right? And we were talking about that in just that capacity. But also I was sharing that for those of you that don't know, I'm obsessed with Sex and the City. I just love that show. I love it. I could listen to it all the time, and it does have some nuggets of wisdom in there. Mm-hmm. And I was watching an episode, I think it was titled Great Sexpectations. And even on our, dates and things like that, as a single woman, sometimes I have these expectations like, this guy's so good on paper, and we have such an awesome time. Like, maybe our makeout sessions are great, and then you want to take it to the next level and it just flops. Yeah. So both of you are like projecting this large expectation onto one another, and oftentimes it can flop.
Yeah, so there's so much pressure there, Mia.
It's a lot of pressure. And if you don't think that other person can feel that pressure, I'd like to say, I think you might be wrong.
There's so much pressure there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man.
There.
But similarly, right, even outside of that context,
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of the expectations, right, we put so much pressure
Mm-hmm.
just about in every situation.
Every situation. You're setting yourself up every time.
Man, you know,
So I go ahead.
whether it's a pair of shoes
Mm-hmm.
or an apple that you were going to eat, it's
Yeah.
got to be the greatest apple in the world ever.
Yeah. It's so true. Why do we do that to ourselves?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. You know, that default mode,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if that's a Western thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's an American thing.
So that article I was reading was talking about a long time ago, like where this kind of idea of expectation came from, which is from Piaget, I believe it was, and he coined it as magical thinking,
Hmm.
and that kind of magical thinking is innate, and we think like that as children, um, and then that kind of dies off at like age 7. But we still have this kind of magical thinking debris, if you will. That's what I'm going to call it.
Okay.
And it carries on into our adult life. And so I'm sure there's more to it than that I should probably research and expand more on. But that's what I remember of that. So it's like this magical thinking that we bring into, a world that's maybe not as magical as we'd like to think it is.
No, you're right. And, you know, as you were talking, I'm just kind of thinking about the many different things that we're exposed to that reinforce this idea.
Hmm.
Like, you know, movies, for example.
Oh, yeah.
When we go to watch a movie, we expect the movie to resolve itself in a positive way.
Right.
We expect for the guy to get the girl. We expect for the bad guy to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you this. Some of the best movies that I've seen are the ones where it doesn't end up happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
The guy doesn't get the girl, or the hero does not survive. Maybe the hero dies.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that we can handle those kinds of disappointments.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that you're telling me that, I'm like, well, there's been instances where I've been watching a movie and it doesn't turn out how I expect it to. And I'm like, God, that sucked. This movie is great except for the ending. We're not so, we're not able to really say that. I mean, we can in real life, but yeah, this birthday party really was great except for the ending, or this, relationship was okay except for the ending. You feel really unresolved.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, and we're very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, that's a good word. Uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, I really feel not so great about those endings. I like them tied up in a bow, gives me peace of mind.
Right, right. And so that puts it back on us
Mhm.
and the things we need and the things we want. Um, and it always comes back on us. I mean, that's not a surprise, you know, but these expectations, even the minute expectations,
Mhm.
um, it's very selfish.
Yeah. And it's also weird because we like internalize that as, I don't know, like the world is against us or something. Like
Mm.
it didn't meet our expectation, the reality.
Yeah, almost narcissistic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost, you know, like we get in a car and we're gonna go to work or home, and the traffic is like, oh my God, this sucks, this is terrible. But that's life.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like it is life. Life doesn't always hand you what you want, and what are you going to do with it?
Now, let's push that a little further. Life doesn't always hand you what you want, but how often does life gives you what you want? My
Yeah,
life, it's very rare in my life.
right. Yeah, it's rare in mine too. But it gives me a lot of things that are better.
This is true. This is true. But the expectation that things will be perfect is not rooted in reality.
It's that beautiful, magical thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rarely do I get what I want. And so I'm constantly in this state of adjusting my expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said at the beginning, that's the world that I'm okay with, that I live in, this world where I'm constantly having to adjust and adapt
Right.
to what's happening, whether it's rain, or traffic, or um, a meal that wasn't prepared like I ordered.
So how do we handle that? How do we move about that with these expectations? Because as much as I want to say I'm going to have these expectations in check after this podcast, I know I'm going to go out into the world and be like, I'm going to go to Target. I'm going to get all this stuff. Like I have something I want, and then it's going to not happen. I may
But
not happen.
right, and there's a strong possibility that it won't happen.
Yeah.
But we live and move in a world where so much is promised to us,
Mm-hmm.
like have it your way and
Yeah.
customized and tailored just for you.
I like that. Expand on that a little bit. I like where you're going with that.
Um, well, that's good because I'm not even sure where I'm going with it. But when I look around and you pay attention to the messages that we get, there is this idea that you can have it your way. I mean, we're thinking about Burger King, or you can show up and this thing that you want will be delivered when you want it, how you want it, where you want it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and despite the disappointments, we keep fighting or desiring that thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's kind of when you say it like that, it almost makes it seem like it's convenient, a
Oh, I would agree.
convenience
Oh,
factor.
no, listen. That's also a good word for it. Um, we don't expect to be inconvenienced at all in our
Mm-hmm.
lives.
And then when you are inconvenienced or something is difficult, I feel like people are like, well, it's not meant for me then.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's a sign.
With anything, yeah, it's a sign. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not, whatever it is, it's not meant for you. Um, but maybe again, it's just that kind of that magical thinking, that expectation that we're projecting on pretty much every avenue of our life.
Hmm. Hmm. And so that ties into what I said earlier, right? So the idea of right and wrong and what should and should not be, I don't buy into that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, the meanings that we make of things that happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we make entirely too much of things. So
I
maybe,
agree.
yeah, maybe, so you ordered a burger or a steak. I think we were talking about steak earlier, and it didn't come out
Yeah.
how you wanted. And the waiter must be racist or sexist, or because they're doing it to you,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, that kind of brings it back to my point of like we're internalizing that kind of um, expectation not being met as like rejection or um, something against us, like a strike against us, when it's maybe our own, uh, like you were saying, kind of that narcissistic feeling or
Mm-hmm.
thinking.
And the fact is, it may have absolutely nothing to do with anything.
Nothing, nothing, but it is all about us. Didn't you know
Oh
that?
man.
Yeah, I know. So when you start to have these expectations, just and we're talking about like events and things like that, and what about like person to person, or like kind of you alluded to it a little bit of these expectations that we have on our community.
Mm, yeah. So, the expectations we have of our community is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as we're doing this, I'm thinking back to, like the onset of all these race
Mm-hmm.
riots and protests
Mm-hmm.
not too long ago.
Right.
Um, the question is then, should we have any expectations of each other or our community or of anything?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I've thought about this in the past, I don't know if the question is, should we have any? It's more or less, what do we do with the expectations that we have?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't go looking for the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
They're innate.
Right.
So
Right.
the expectations that we have of our community,
Mm-hmm.
um, before I can look at what do we do with it. The question is, where does it come from?
Mm. That's exactly. That's
Where
a
do,
good, where does it come? You have to think, is it coming from what's being reinforced? Like with images, with like, you know, how our, how we were raised, how we're psychologically put together. Where you're right, like where does that come from? And if you don't even know where that's coming from, then how are you to say kind of like where's that to expect someone to meet your expectation?
no,
That makes sense.
I get it, and it's a really jacked up. It's a mind screw up,
Mm-hmm.
and most people just kind of stay away from that because if you have that thought exercise, it doesn't always lead you where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So so with the expectations of your community,
Yeah.
um, if you're talking about let's say Black people in America,
Mm-hmm.
the expectation that equality or women pay equality,
Mm-hmm.
um, whatever sense of justice that we feel should exist, the question is, where does that come from?
Mm-hmm.
Does that exist in America? Did America promise that?
Right. That
What,
belief system, that faith, that morality,
yeah,
maybe.
what is that expectation rooted in?
Mm-hmm.
Because that will help us with the disappointments.
Right. That kind of thought of like everyone is equal.
Yeah. Now, I mean, that's a nice idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as I say that, maybe it's rooted in optimism.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we want to live in a world where all our needs are met and expectations are met. These
Mm-hmm.
rose-colored glasses.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, I don't know that I can say that we should not have certain expectations.
Mm. So that makes me think of, do we use the word standard as synonymous to expectation?
Well, that's a good question. And when I hear the word standard, again, the same question follows, whose standard?
Right. Like you hear this word standard in a lot of things, like, this is our business standards. These are our kind of like our, I feel like they're like their guidelines
Mhm.
almost, or the standards to which I live by. um, he didn't meet a certain standard. Is that just a fun name and a guise for expectation?
Yeah. And he didn't meet your standard. She didn't
Mm-hmm.
meet your standard. They didn't meet my standard.
Mm-hmm.
Whose fault is that?
Right.
Do do I blame them for not meeting my standards? Did they know what my standards were? Do they
Hmm.
even care to meet my standards?
Did I communicate them?
You,
Cool.
yeah. And so I've communicated my standards, and you say, okay, thank you for sharing.
Right. That's nice. Great.
it, it's and even if we're talking within a marriage, right? So we put all kinds of pressure on that because we've
Mm-hmm.
committed,
Mm-hmm.
and expectations are plentiful,
Mm-hmm.
not only in relationships but specifically in marriages.
Yeah. It's like you're supposed to do that. That's just the standard of that's our expectation. That's my expectation of you.
Right, right. And so this is what I love about relationship renegades, because a lot of that crap just needs to be like, I want to say tossed out the window, but we must first examine it first,
Mm-hmm.
because we have these ideas about relationships, and whether they're intimate or communal relationships, or even the relationships we have with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
the things we expect from people in all those different relationships. Where does it come from?
Right.
And why do we expect those things? Why do we expect certain things of our children or of our employers, um, of the fast food joint down the street?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we're giving them $5 for a meal?
Right. And then what do you do after if someone doesn't meet that expectation? Are they bad people? Can you not be around them? Is that then an exercise in forgiveness? Where does that go?
Man, that takes a lot of that takes me down a rabbit hole, because
Yeah. Well, I think
yeah.
about that in the sense of community. Like we have an expectation of a standard. And, you know, there are people in the world that aren't meeting certain expectations of equality and things like that within our community. Or maybe the expectation that they should know more,
Hmm.
or we should know more, or whatever it is. And it can get kind of dicey. Like, when do you say, um, okay, now what do you do with it?
Yeah. Now, I think one of the things we have to point out here, there are
Mhm.
um, basic and fundamental rights and human rights.
Yes, absolutely.
We're not disputing those. Okay.
No. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
No,
Okay. I don't expect
none of
to
that.
die when I'm walking down the street for
Yes.
being black. I don't expect that women are just being abused, raped, or
Mm-hmm.
assaulted for being
Mm-hmm.
women.
Right.
Okay. Children shouldn't be. I don't expect that children are going to be abused. Right,
Mm-hmm.
they shouldn't be, because they're small and defenseless, right? We're not talking about
Vulnerable.
that, right?
Right.
Vulnerable, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are basic rights and decency, and then there are laws. So let's just kind of put that out there and set it aside,
Right.
just so we're clear. But we're talking about these expectations that are not set in stone. They're not rights issues. They're not, you
Mm-hmm.
know they're not those things.
Right.
They're the other stuff, the uh interpersonal stuff, the relationship stuff.
Yeah, that's a really important designation. So thank you for doing that, because I don't want that to be convoluted.
Yeah, no. And I mean, I can almost imagine people thinking like, well, wait, Jameson, what the hell are you saying? What do you mean, what are you
Yeah.
saying? Is it okay?
Yeah.
No,
No, no, it's not.
no, it's never okay.
Right.
But in the context of your relationships, your
Mm-hmm.
expectations of your partner, your spouse, your friends, your family, when they disagree
Mm-hmm.
with you, you know,
Right.
and what do you do with it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's one answer for everybody.
Yeah. And when I talk about too community, I think like also your family system, like, your friend system, like, are you dating a person? Are you in a marriage and they don't like them? Their expectation is they're not, that person's not meeting the expectation that they have of you
Right.
and who you should date or who you should marry or raise your kid this way.
And we've all been there. We all have family who bring someone home, and you're like, "What the hell?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you find this person?"
Yeah. uh, and you'll feel that too. You'll know.
Yeah.
You'll know whether they say it or they just kind of act it. You'll know.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So, I mean, I don't know. So, should we have great expectations? Like I said, I don't live in the world of shoulds.
Mm.
I acknowledge that we have these high expectations, and my answer always is, well, why, where, how did that come to be?
Mm-hmm.
You know, am I saying that one ought not have such high expectations? No, no. I mean, because if I go to buy a pair of shoes or buy a house, I have certain expectations of the house. But now,
Mm-hmm.
are they beyond what was promised to me?
Mm-hmm.
That's a different question.
Yeah. So exploring where that comes from, where those expectations come from.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you made the comment earlier, because a lot of times they are rooted in our own histories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. Hmm. Some rich information here.
Yeah. So, I mean, we brought up the topic, and it sounds like we confuse people even more than when we started. But I think it's a worthy topic. It's a worthy conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and I would actually encourage you guys who are listening to go have this conversation. When you find yourself in a situation where things didn't turn out like you planned, things didn't turn out like had been promised, you know
Mm-hmm.
sit in that for a little bit.
Yeah, sit with it.
See where you end up sitting in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and after you've done that, leave us a comment.
Yeah, send a comment down below and share this.
Yeah, tell me you hate me. Tell me shut up. Talk about something else. Whatever. We'd like to know if this was of value to you. We're gonna ask that you share this episode. Bring a friend next time.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing is caring. Leave a review. I want to say we expect 5-star review.
Well done.
But after hearing this conversation, feel free to do what you want to do, and I'll deal with it. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Relationship Renegade Weekend Edition, and we look forward to catching you next time. You guys enjoy your weekend. Want to say bye, Mia?
Bye. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.